My name is Andrea Miles. I am 34 years old. For 11 months, my mother taped a fine to my front door every single Friday. 46 white envelopes in total, every one of them over a fence she claimed was the wrong color. She ran our homeowners association like it was her personal kingdom. Then last August, at the annual meeting, she stood in front of 60 of our neighbors and read my violations out loud, one by one, like a judge reading a charge sheet. She thought that night would finally put me in my place. She had no idea a quiet woman sitting in the third row, a woman who worked in the county deed office, was about to raise her hand and ask one simple question about a piece of land called Lot 14. That question changed everything in under a minute. But what I did next, with one folder of papers and a shoebox full of envelopes, is the part my family still refuses to talk about. Every Friday at exactly 7:40 in the morning, a tan Buick rolled slowly past my house. It never fully stopped. It slowed at my mailbox, and a woman in a navy blazer walked up my path holding an envelope and a roll of tape. She pressed it to my door, smoothed the corners down twice, and walked back to her car with her chin lifted like she had just delivered a court summons. That woman was my mother. The envelope always looked the same. Crisp white paper. My address written in her neat, careful handwriting. Inside was always the same notice. Violation. Unapproved fence stain. Fine, $50. Please remit payment to the Hollis Creek Homeowners Association. 48 Fridays passed during that stretch of time, and I received 46 of those envelopes. She skipped only 2 weeks, the week of a bad ice storm, and the week of my grandmother's death anniversary. That second skip is the detail that still keeps me up some nights. I kept every single envelope, stacked in order, inside a shoebox on my kitchen counter. I'm a land surveyor by profession. Keeping careful records isn't just a habit for me. It's the way I make sense of the world. I never went outside to confront her. I would just stand at my kitchen window, coffee going cold in my hands, and watch my own mother tape my name to my own front door like I was a stranger. Here's what almost nobody driving past would have guessed. Friday used to be my favorite day of the week. It used to mean coffee with my grandmother on that same porch, back when the fence was freshly painted, and we both still had flecks of paint on our hands. I need to back up, because none of this makes sense without her. My grandmother's name was Ruth. The house my mother kept finding fault with was the house Ruth had lived in for 36 years, Lot 12, in the Hollis Creek subdivision. I measure land for a living. I set boundary stakes and certify property lines for an engineering firm. I am precise. I am patient. I am the last person anyone would call a troublemaker. 3 years before all this started, Ruth had a small stroke, and I moved into her spare room to help care for her. It was the best decision I ever made. We had one final good summer together, and we spent part of it repainting her back fence. She picked the color herself, a soft gray she called Dove Wing, and said if the board had a problem with it, they could take it up with her personally. Nobody ever did. Nobody ever had a problem with Ruth. She passed peacefully in her own bed one August morning, her garden blooming just outside the window. Her will was simple. Everything came to me. When probate finally closed, over a year after we lost her, I became the legal owner of the house where I had learned to shell peas as a little girl. I kept her furniture. I kept her rose beds. And I kept that fence exactly the color she had chosen because some things you just don't repaint. Behind that fence sat one more piece of property my family always called the garden lot, a wide, half-wild stretch of land with Ruth's old fig tree standing in the corner. Remember that lot? It becomes the center of everything. Now, my mother, Carolyn, 63 years old, a retired school office manager, had spent 30 years enforcing rules with a clipboard and a laminated hall pass system. She has perfect posture, a closet full of navy blazers, and handwriting so neat it looks typed. For 25 years, she served as secretary of our HOA, doing all the unglamorous behind-the-scenes work. When the old president retired 6 years ago, she ran unopposed and took over completely, drafting a 30-page rulebook she called the community standards. I want to be fair because it matters she was good at parts of the job. When a storm knocked down a tree in a neighbor's driveway, she had a cleanup crew there within 2 days. When drainage problems flooded part of the neighborhood, she fought the county until it got fixed. People were a little afraid of her, but they also called her first when something broke. But her power wasn't really hers. It was borrowed, a title on a piece of letterhead, and a room full of people who preferred to comply rather than argue. And that kind of power needs constant feeding to survive. My mother never really owned anything of her own. She wore authority the way some people wear a rented tuxedo. I used to catch my grandmother watching her with an expression that was sad and fond at the same time. It took me years and one very long night to finally understand what that look meant. The first envelope appeared on a Friday in early September, about 3 weeks after probate closed and the deed was officially recorded in my name. I actually laughed out loud when I opened it, certain it was a mistake. That fence had been the same gray for 3 years. My grandmother had chosen it. I called my mother immediately. "It's the standard, sweetheart," she said, in the same tone she once used on teenagers without hall passes. Gray isn't an approved color. I told her the fence had been that color long before I owned the house. There was a pause on the line, just a beat too long. "Your grandmother had her arrangements," she said. "You're the owner of record now." Owner of record. I remember exactly where I was standing when she said those words, because it was such a cold, strange phrase coming from the woman who once taught me how to ride a bike. That night, I went looking for the old board records, and I found something that stopped me cold. Meeting minutes from 2019, typed and filed by my mother herself. Fence stain, Lot 12, Dovewing Gray, approved, unanimous vote. My mother's own tidy signature was on the approval. My fence had never actually been in violation, which meant this had never really been about the fence. I didn't argue, and I didn't pay. Instead, I did what surveyors do. I documented everything. I filed a formal written appeal, attached the old approved minutes, attached photographs, and requested a hearing. The hearing took place in the clubhouse trailer on a Tuesday night. 4 board members sat behind a folding table, my mother in the center chair. I laid out 6 calm minutes of evidence, the old approval, the dates, the photos. The treasurer, Pete, read the minutes twice and looked visibly uncomfortable. Then my mother folded her hands and said the previous approval had belonged to the previous owner, and approvals don't transfer. The board voted 4-0 to deny my appeal. She called me Miss Miles the entire meeting. My own mother. Sitting alone in my truck afterward, a memory surfaced from when I was about 10. The city had once mistakenly sent my grandmother a citation for a fence that wasn't even hers. She read it at the kitchen table, laughed her big laugh, and tossed it in a drawer. "Don't ever confuse the person holding the clipboard," she told me, "with the person holding the deed." At the time I thought it was just something funny grandmothers say. I understand now that she never said anything by accident. People ask why I didn't hire a lawyer immediately, or just sell the house. A real estate attorney in our county charges around $350 an hour. The fine was $50 a week. Fighting it would have cost more than a decade of Fridays combined, and my mother knew that math better than anyone. As for selling, you don't give up your grandmother's rose garden just to win an argument. And underneath everything sat the oldest, heaviest math of all. She was still my mother, so I stopped arguing and started documenting instead. Every envelope went into the shoebox in order, dated. Every phone call got logged in a notepad. I photographed the fence every season, time-stamped, looking honestly beautiful against the trees. If she wanted a paper war, I would give her the one thing paper wars reward, a flawless record. The only neighbor who ever said anything out loud was Lorraine, my grandmother's closest friend, a retired nurse in her 70s who has never once whispered in her life. She walked a pound cake across the street one Friday, watched my mother's Buick pull away, and said, "Ruth would have had words about this." Then she looked past me toward the garden lot and the old fig tree and said something that stuck with me for weeks. "Your grandmother owned more of this neighborhood than people remember, baby. A lot more." By the following June, the numbers had turned uglier. Somewhere around 40 envelopes at $50 each, plus stacked late fees, and the association's ledger now claimed I owed more than $2,000 and climbing. I found out because a new letter arrived, certified, signed for at my own door. Notice of intent to file a lien. If the balance wasn't paid in full, the association would place a lien on my property. A lien is not a minor inconvenience. It's a permanent stain on your title, sitting in the public record, following the house through every future sale or refinance. To someone whose entire career depends on clean, accurate records, it felt like an unremovable mark. My mother wasn't just finding me anymore. She was reaching for the deed itself. That night I read the letter closely and noticed something in the fine print where legal filings like this actually get recorded. The office of the county clerk. The deed room. The one place where every lie about land eventually has to face the truth. I tried peace first, and I want that on record. I invited my mother to dinner, and she came because appearances always matter to her. I made pot roast, my grandmother's recipe. We made small talk for 20 minutes, and then I put down my fork and offered to pay the entire balance that night if the fine stopped and the lien threat disappeared. I even reached for my checkbook. Her expression flickered, something close to disappointment, as if I'd offered to end a game she was finally winning. "It was never about the money, Andrea," she said. "Then what was it about?" I asked. She lined up her silverware perfectly and said the sentence I've replayed in my mind almost every day since. "It's about respect. A neighborhood is like a family. It only works if someone holds the line. Rules are how I love you." I asked her gently why it had all started in September, 3 weeks after probate closed. She folded her napkin into a perfect rectangle and said, in a voice that had gone flat and bright at once, "Your grandmother made her choices. I've made mine." Standing on the porch afterward, I finally understood the shape of what was happening. The fines had a starting date. That starting date was the deed transfer. On my lunch break one day, I went to the county deed room to check whether the lien had actually been filed yet, because a thread on paper and an actual filed record are two very different things. Behind the counter was a woman about my age, wearing reading glasses on a chain, with the calm confidence of someone who has seen every property dispute imaginable. Her name tag read D. Whitfield, Deputy Clerk. She looked at my parcel and said something that caught me off guard. "Miles off Hollis Creek. I recorded that estate deed myself last summer. Clean chain of title. You don't see that every day." It turned out she didn't just work in the deed room. She lived in the neighborhood herself. She checked the index twice. No lien filed. Not yet. As I turned to leave, she added something almost offhand. "Records don't care who's loud, Miss Miles. Folks out your way might be surprised what the index actually shows." That Saturday, I walked the garden lot for the first time since the funeral, the way Ruth and I used to walk it together, shelling peas. Officially, it's Lot 14, just over half an acre behind my property, with her fig tree still anchoring the far corner. Except now, it barely resembled a garden. Years earlier, the association had installed a white office trailer there, a gravel parking lot with 14 spaces, and a wooden pavilion used for meetings and community events. The entire civic heart of the neighborhood sitting on what used to be my grandmother's garden. Here's the important part. During probate, I had specifically asked my mother what legal arrangement existed for the association's use of that land, a lease, an easement, anything. She had brushed it off. That's community property, honey. Always has been. Don't go stirring up paperwork. I was working long hours. The estate lawyer had a backlog, and I let the questions slide onto my someday list. But standing there that Saturday, holding the association's own glossy welcome map, I noticed Lot 14 was shaded green and labeled Common Area. And something in my surveyor's brain started quietly sounding an alarm, because I had studied the original neighborhood plat years earlier out of curiosity, and I could not recall any common area ever being drawn behind Lot 12. So Monday morning I ordered a full title examination on Lot 14, every deed, every plat, every tax record, going back to the very beginning. I hired a trusted examiner, and in the evenings I began pulling old microfilm records myself in the deed room. The county archive took 3 weeks to produce the old probate files. The examiner needed 2 more weeks for the full certified chain. Some nights I sat in my truck outside the records office and thought, what if I'm wrong? What if there's some old lease buried in a drawer somewhere, and I'm just a grieving woman building a courthouse case out of a mother who simply doesn't love me the way I need? While I waited, Lorraine filled in pieces no record could tell me. She told me that in 1988, when the neighborhood was brand new, Ruth and my grandfather Earl bought Lot 12 to live on, and then bought the empty lot behind it too, just for extra space. Ruth turned it into her garden almost immediately. The developer originally planned to build a clubhouse near the entrance, but went bankrupt in 1996, and the clubhouse was never built. So the neighborhood had nowhere to gather. Ruth simply opened her gate. Egg hunts among her vegetable rows. 4th of July gatherings under the fig tree. Eventually people forgot the land was ever privately hers at all, and she never corrected them because being needed, she used to say, keeps a neighborhood warm. After my grandfather passed in 2009, the land became hers alone. Then, in 2019, when the board asked to place their office trailer there, Ruth wrote them a formal, notarized letter. She kept a copy in a green file box in the hall closet. That green file box and the certified county records arrived on my kitchen table the same week. Inside the mailing tube was a certified copy of the original recorded plat from 1987. Lot 14 wasn't marked as common area anywhere. It was a private, numbered buildable lot, same as any other. The chain of title followed clean and unbroken. Warranty deed to Ruth and Earl in 1988. Full ownership to Ruth alone after Earl's death in 2009. Then, to me last year, through the estate. No lease. No easement. No dedication. Not once in 38 years. And behind the deeds sat decades of tax records. Every single year, the property taxes on Lot 14 had been paid by my grandparents, then by Ruth alone, then by the estate, then by me, all on autopay filed in my mind under miscellaneous estate expenses. The HOA office, the parking lot, the pavilion, the podium my mother spoke from every month. All of it sat on land the association never owned, and had always known it didn't own. I brought everything to Warren, a real estate attorney my firm had worked with for years. He read through it twice, took off his glasses, and said it was the cleanest ownership case he'd seen in a long time. In Georgia, claiming land you don't legally own requires either 20 years of hostile, continuous possession, or 7 years with some form of defective paperwork pretending to grant ownership. The association had neither. And permission that starts with a true owner's blessing never counts toward any of it at all. Legally, he said, they were exactly what Ruth's letter called them, guests. He laid out my options. I could revoke permission and have them removed within 60 days. I could sue for years of fair rental value, which he estimated around $275 a month, adding up to nearly $20,000 over 6 years, though courts would likely only enforce about 4 years of it. Or I could simply put the truth on record and let the association negotiate. You hold every card, Andrea, he told me. The only question left is what kind of neighbor you want to be once this is over. I didn't call him back for a week because part of me still wanted to just be a daughter. Then the annual meeting notice arrived. Item 4. Delinquent accounts to be read aloud. Item 5. A $40,000 paving assessment for the community lot to be voted on. They were planning to pave over my grandmother's garden and build the entire neighborhood for it. Reading that agenda in my driveway, something in me went quiet and clear. Up until then, my silence had only cost me. But this was different. A $40,000 assessment split across 112 households to pave land the association had never legally owned. My retired neighbors, young families, every person who had ever smiled at me by the mailboxes would be paying for something false. And the day the truth eventually surfaced, the association would face tearing out the pavement or paying me for the land beneath it. Either way, at everyone else's expense. Staying silent any longer wasn't keeping peace anymore. It was letting real harm happen to people who trusted her. So I gave my mother one final private warning, not for strategy, but because she deserved it. I drove to her house on a Sunday and told her plainly, drop the fines, cancel the lien, and, before Thursday, actually ask me about Lot 14. That lot belongs to this association, she said, each word placed like a brick. I asked her to just make one phone call to the county to confirm it. I don't need a county computer to tell me what I've known for 40 years, she said. We went back and forth, polite and cold, until I stopped hearing her words and started really seeing the room around her. Decades of her own meticulous handwriting in binders on the table, framed photos on the wall of old 4th of July gatherings under Ruth's fig tree, my grandmother always at the center, my mother always at the edge of the frame, half turned away, holding a tray. The woman who did everything and was remembered for none of it. You were gone 11 years, she said quietly, for one moment sounding like herself and not like the president of anything. You come back and everything just lands in your lap. The house, the land, her. Then the armor went back on. Rules are how I love you. Someday you'll understand that. Word travels fast in a small subdivision, and my mother made sure it did. By midweek, neighbors who used to wave now looked away. The story circulating, according to Lorraine, was that Ruth's granddaughter had inherited everything and was now trying to cause trouble for the whole community out of greed. She didn't spread that story by accident. Isolation is a tool, same as a lien. That same night, at the bottom of Ruth's green file box, in a folder labeled Garden Lot, I found the original 2019 letter Lorraine had described. Polite, clear, unmistakable. She was pleased to allow the association temporary use of her land, by her permission alone, revocable at any time, never to be mistaken for a transfer of ownership. Stapled behind it was the association's own delivery receipt, acknowledging the letter, signed by the secretary, Carolyn Miles. My mother's own signature. She had known the entire time. She wasn't fighting over a fence. She was trying to erase a name on a deed she had spent 6 years pretending didn't exist. In Warren's office, I signed 2 documents. The first, a formal notice of ownership and termination of permissive use, informing the association that the land was privately owned and their occupancy required a new written agreement. The second, an invoice for 6 years of fair rental value, $19,800. We sent both by certified mail to the association's registered address, a post office box that, Unsurprisingly, only one person ever collected from. Then I RSVP'd to my first annual meeting ever. Warren asked one last time if I wanted to settle everything quietly through lawyers instead. I thought about it seriously. Then I thought about item 4 on that agenda, my name about to be read aloud to 60 families under a pavilion sitting on my own land.
No.
Some things don't belong behind closed doors. The final Friday came 6 days before the meeting. Same routine, the Buick, the blazer, the tape. This time the envelope held 2 pages instead of 1. And for the first time in 46 Fridays, I didn't hide behind the curtain. I stood on the porch with my coffee while she walked up. She hesitated for half a second, caught off guard, then recovered and taped the envelope up anyway. "You're up early," she said. "See you Thursday, Mom," I told her. Something flickered across her face. Surprise, then something almost like hope, because in her mind my attendance meant surrender. "That's good, Andrea," she said, softer than she'd spoken to me in a year. "It'll be good for people to see you there." The night before the meeting, Lorraine came over with fresh roses and sat with me while I packed my bag the way a surveyor prepares for a job. Nothing extra, nothing missing. The certified plat. The full title chain. 38 years of tax receipts. Ruth's 2019 letter with its signed receipt. The shoebox with all 46 envelopes in order. And one more envelope, thick and new, that I wasn't ready to talk about yet. I sat at the table and drew a line down a legal pad. One column labeled what I could take, the other labeled what I actually want. The first column filled quickly and uglier than I expected. Evict them. Sue for years of back rent. Read her own violations aloud in front of everyone the way she'd planned to read mine. The second column had only 3 lines, and it sounded more like my grandmother than me. Keep the garden and the Fridays. Come home to a neighborhood, not a battlefield. The annual meeting convened at 7 that Thursday evening, under the pavilion sitting on lot 14, a fact nobody but me yet understood the irony of. 60-some neighbors fanned themselves with yellow agenda sheets in the August heat. My mother stood at the podium in her navy blazer, running the meeting exactly like she always had, confident, composed, entirely in control. She moved through the agenda until she reached item 4, delinquent accounts. "The board believes in transparency," she said, "so this year, delinquencies will be read aloud." Her eyes found mine. She read every single violation aloud. Same fence. Same $50. Date after date after date, in a calm, pleasant voice, while my neighbors turned to stare at me like witnesses to a car accident. I sat perfectly still and let every date land, because holding steady under pressure is the one thing surveying has never had to teach me. Then she moved to item 5, the paving project. She held up a rendering. $40,000 split across every household to pave over the exact spot where Ruth's fig tree still stood. "I'll entertain a motion," she said. And a hand rose in the 3rd row. "Point of information, Madam President," said Dana, the deputy clerk from the deed office, sitting there as an ordinary neighbor that night. "Before you continue, who do you think owns lot 14? "The association owns it," my mother answered immediately, obviously. "I ask," Dana said gently, "because I work in the real estate division at the county clerk's office. I record deeds for this entire county. And before I vote to spend my own money paving this lot, you should know something. The county has no record, none, of this association ever owning a single square foot of the ground we are currently sitting on." The pavilion went completely silent, then erupted into stunned murmuring. My mother banged her gavel and, for the first time in 6 years, it didn't work. The treasurer's voice rose from the crowd. "Carolyn, whose lot are we actually on?" I stood up slowly and walked to the front, carrying my bag and the tube holding the certified plat. I asked the treasurer for use of his table, not my mother. Then I did exactly what I do for a living in front of 60 of my neighbors on my grandmother's land. I unrolled the certified 1987 plat across the table. My name is Andrea Miles, I said. Most of you know me as the fence lady from item 4. I'm also a licensed land surveyor, and I'd like to show you something. This is Lot 14, recorded in 1987. On the original certified plat, it has never been marked as common area. In 1988, it was deeded to my grandparents, Ruth and Earl. I walked them through the entire chain, the survivorship, the estate transfer, my current ownership. My family has paid the property taxes on this land for 38 years, I said. My grandmother paid them while she hosted your egg hunts. I've paid them while this association fined my fence. Then I read Ruth's 2019 letter aloud, word for word, and held up the association's own signed receipt acknowledging it, signed by the secretary, Carolyn Miles. I didn't look at my mother while the room turned toward her. I looked at the fig tree instead. Voices rose immediately. Someone shouted that the board should resign that night. Someone else called for eviction of the office trailer. There was real anger in the air. And for one honest, tired moment, I wanted to just let it happen. I had the votes. I had the ground itself. All I had to do was nothing. Instead, I raised my hand for quiet, and to my own surprise, the room gave it to me. Nobody is getting evicted, I said. I want to be clear about what happens next because, unlike item 4, I believe decisions belong in public, not private grudges. I placed the thick envelope on the table. This is an invoice from me to the association. Fair rental for 6 years of use of my land. $19,800. You billed me every Friday for 11 months, I said, finally looking at my mother directly. Here's one invoice for 6 years. Now you know how a Friday feels. Then I offered them a different path. A $1 a year lease, 5 years, on 4 conditions. Refund all 46 fines and withdraw the lien threat completely. Cancel the paving assessment entirely. Move all future appeals to an independent committee with no board members. And fence off and replant the fig tree corner as a public community garden, named after my grandmother. Meet those terms, I said, and the invoice disappears, and your office stays exactly where it is as my tenant, the way my grandmother should have been thanked all along instead of quietly erased. My mother looked at me the way you look at a stranger wearing a familiar face. For 11 months, I said, you taught me exactly what a rule is worth when the wrong person is holding the clipboard. My grandmother taught me who actually holds the deed. Borrowed power always comes with a due date. Yours is tonight. The motion to accept my terms passed within a minute, nearly every hand in the room rising before my mother could even respond. She didn't yell. Yelling was never her style. She simply gathered her papers, squared the edges the way she squared everything, walked to the table, and set her gavel down gently on the corner of my grandmother's plat. Wood on paper, borrowed power, laid down on the record. I'll offer my resignation, she said to the room, effective tonight. As she passed me, she paused close enough that only I could hear her. That lot was supposed to be mine, she said. And that was it, the whole truth underneath 11 months of Fridays. Not really about a fence at all. A mother who had spent her whole life running rooms she was given because the one thing she actually wanted had been given to someone else. The paperwork was finalized within 2 weeks. The refund check for $2,300 arrived with a note from the treasurer. Refund all of it. The lien threat was formally withdrawn. The paving project died without a second vote. The new Independent Appeals Committee overturned 2 other unfair fines within its first month. And that October, neighbors gathered with shovels to build a small cedar fenced garden around the fig tree with a hand-routed sign that read Ruth's Corner. My mother didn't move away, didn't apologize, didn't call for months. Some neighbors still wave to her because plenty of them do genuinely owe her for a clear driveway or a fixed drainage problem, and that's real too. At Thanksgiving, she finally sent one short text. Your grandmother would be pleased. She usually was with you. I read it more times than I can count. I didn't answer that night. I went outside and watered the fig tree in the dark instead. This past Friday, 7:40 came and went, and the street stayed quiet. No Buick. No tape. I took my coffee out to the porch the way I used to with Ruth, and the fence stood there, still quietly, still permanently, gray. Past it, on lot 14, two kids from down the street were picking the last ripe figs of the season, exactly what that tree was always meant for. I put the shoebox up in the attic last week, right next to my grandmother's old canning jars. I didn't burn the envelopes, and I never will. Receipts are like fences. They only look ugly to the person standing on the wrong side of them. 46 Fridays. My mother spent trying to teach me that I was nothing more than a name on a list, a balance owed. It took one Thursday, one map, and one honest question from the third row to remind us both what I actually was all along. The name on the deed. Hello, Clued. I have already shared my story above. Based on this story, I need a complete YouTube SEO package targeting a USA audience. Please provide everything in English. A highly clickable, SEO-optimized YouTube title. A professional SEO description. SEO tags. Relevant hashtags. I also need thumbnail text. I will share my competitor's thumbnail. Please analyze it carefully and create thumbnail text in the same style, structure, and number of lines, but make it completely unique and based on my story. In addition, I need a prompt that I can give to ChatGPT to recreate my competitor's thumbnail according to my story. The prompt should instruct ChatGPT to keep the overall thumbnail layout, composition, and visual style similar. Replace the competitor's thumbnail text with a new text you created for my story, using the same color style. Replace the woman in the thumbnail with the female character I provide. Do not change her face or skin tone. Only modify her hairstyle and clothing to match my story. Mention the appropriate hairstyle and outfit in the prompt. Keep the final thumbnail in a professional, high CTR YouTube style. If I don't provide my own female character image, then use the woman from the competitor's thumbnail as the base and only change her hairstyle and outfit according to my story while replacing the text with my new thumbnail text.